Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we're going to go a little bit over what happened throughout the weeks. Apologies for the late episode. Our schedules just really weren't aligning last week, but we managed to get something going for you guys today. A very special episode. I say that for a lot of our ideas, but I am really excited for this one. We're going to go a little bit over the CONCACAF Champions Cup action that happened, including the game that I went to on in Victoria, or Langford technically, on the Vancouver Islands for the Whitecaps against Tigres, before we're going to jump into a little bit of a grading of all of the teams' transfers so far. It'll be a fun little thing going through all the transfers and discussing what we each individually think the clubs have done so far and how we think they've done it. But before we jump into all of that, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, and make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube if you haven't, so you can see these visuals that we are putting up. We're going to have some fun backgrounds and some fun slides for you, especially during the grading section. I also have created some memes for the games that we're going to be discussing. So if you don't want to miss all that, make sure to either, if you have Spotify, look at the video part of the Spotify or on our YouTube so you can see what we've been up to. But Mike, let's start with not even the Champions Cup, but let's start with, what's been going on between the CSB and Mediapro, primarily that nothing has happened since the announcements. We made a huge episode, our last episode, about what was going on and giving these details and everything, and we kind of alluded to that. Hopefully more information will be revealed soon, and evidently it was not. And all that really, yeah, exactly, and all that really came out of it was that sort of One Soccer Media Pro kind of very quietly said, "Oh yeah, we still have CONCACAF," and so they started advertising CONCACAF. And then One Soccer came back after like a week of radio silence from the dead, and just started posting things again. And I was talking with Alex, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't really know what's going on. One week I thought I didn't have a job, next week I do have a job." So, and like you can see there are a lot of. Yeah,
it's a very confusing time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very, very confusing time, and the only, I guess, sort of official thing that we have is not even official, but I guess the most high profile word we've gotten is from we're confused. Victor Montagliani, the CONCACAF president, who said that on the Footy Prime podcast, said that I think MediaPro and CSB worked out their own issues, and then when they're ready to announce it, they'll announce it. So it might be that this messy breakup is going to result in the two parties getting back together, and it's starting to feel like one of those high school dramas, those like serial dramas from like the mid 2000s, in which the popular couple breaks up and everyone doesn't know what's going on, and then like a week or two later they get back together.
This is a couple who have had a few too many on the night out, who have posted some things they don't mean.
Yeah.
And
they put it in the public domain. They were subtweeting. They were, putting those like black background Insta stories, calling each other out, and maybe now they're making up.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much don't delete your One Soccer app just yet. Keep that handy. And we'll have to see where we go. I mean, it was good that we got to see these CONCACAF Champions Cup games all out there for us live. But yeah, this is very much both. It seems like we're at a stage where they both realised, okay, we've kicked off about a few things. We've aired our dirty laundry in public. Other potential options probably aren't as easy to find or as promising as maybe the CSB thought. Media Pro themselves have probably thought maybe we could do a little bit more as well. Maybe maybe it isn't all your fault, and we'll have to see if that's the case. But it's very much, yeah. I mean, we're getting closer and closer now to when we'll be expecting some live games to be shown. It'd be nice to know where to send our subscription money, wouldn't it?
Yeah, especially since, before I was thinking that after we did the episode and, the news had fully sunk in, and I was thinking about it, it's like maybe what CSB can do is they can keep One Soccer and sort of maybe buy it off Mediapro to have that production company, and then just find a broadcaster. And finding the broadcaster is more of the easy thing, but you can keep One Soccer as a production company because, I mean, before, One Soccer got the rights to CONCACAF, before that was known, I was thinking, what else will Media Pro do in Canada? Like they'll probably just slink back into Spain and try to find somewhere else. So
Yeah.
they don't really need the production company One Soccer in Canada. Might as well leave it, and CSB can pick it up and then be able to find a broadcaster and be like, don't worry, we got a production company, which is One Soccer. All you got to do is broadcast it. But it might be that they don't even have to do that. It might be that Media Pro and CSB just make up and they just, get back together, kind of paper over all the cracks, be like, oh yeah, it was no big deal. It was just a lot of just, miscommunication and stuff like that, and try to sweep it under the rug. But if that does occur, it will be a very scrutinized period of time. And I think the league will be a little shaky afterwards, but hopefully everyone can eventually be distracted by the actual action once the season rolls around, and that becomes sort of a memory and less of a thing against it.
Yeah, hopefully. I was listening to a European football podcast over on the continent, it's popular over here, and they were discussing how the French clubs are recovering from the Media Pro disaster over in France recently, and the Canadian Premier League got a nice little mention within that within their show. But yeah, it does seem that drama is following this company wherever it goes, and hopefully it doesn't hit as hard as it did in France. I mean, even their clubs are financially better backed than the Canadian Premier League, much more history, obviously. So let's just hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's just everyone's probably mood right now, is just let's just hope for the best. Let's just ride this out and hope that they get back together, or there's a other solution, and we all can watch all of the games once the season starts. But that's for the CPL season, but we're already in the middle of some football action as the CONCACAF Champions Cup started this past week, starting on Wednesday with two matches: Forge against Chivas Guadalajara and the Vancouver Whitecaps against Tigres. We're going to start talking with the Forge game. Unfortunately for Forge, that occasion became the Cade Cowell show.
Really did.
Cade Cowell making a high-profile move from the San Jose Earthquakes MLS to Chivas because of a Mexican link, and with the Mexican rules or the Chivas rules about only Mexican players. They made a loophole there. They found a loophole there. And it proved to be one that was worth exploiting, because in his first competitive game, 2 goals and 1 assist, obviously man of the match. And despite Forge, competing and scoring a goal, unfortunately they fell 3-1 to Chivas. Mike, for you, what was your overall reaction to this match?
Yeah, I mean, it really highlighted that the individual quality that money can buy separated the two sides. Cade Cowell was incredible. I remember just reading about his move out there and interviews with him, how I don't believe he speaks like a word of Spanish. That's just comes, but seems to be able to just link up on the pitch really well, the way they're playing. So that was really impressive from his standpoint. But I mean, we've looked at some of these some of the stats. Forge got 48% of the possession. They got 9 shots away. So only 4 less than Chivas. So they were in the game to a degree, but it's just the final third, that quality that the Mexican side can bring, where they can be so consistent. And it was just a little bit too much for Forge to handle. And there's just a few extra errors which CPL teams will make, because I think of two reasons. Financially, they're coming against teams with bigger budgets that are going to make bigger signings of players with much more experience in continental competitions, and also this is their first game since November, so there is that mix. I mean, I had big concerns, which I think most people did. I think this is a big shout, but obviously when Mandrakar James goes and they haven't brought in a centre back, they've relied on who was playing behind him to step up. Matusala's gone in there, and I was really concerned about their positioning defensively. And I saw, like, watch through Twitter, other fans. Forge are obviously in this sort of strange limbo of, well, as Canadian Premier League fans, we want to support the Canadian Premier League team, but also it's Forge, so many people just won't back them. So we'll see that, but they'll see this game, and yeah, I mean, I obviously want the Canadian Premier League side to win, but all these fans of other teams will see these issues that Forge had. And yes, Chivas have got the quality, but Forge's positioning defensively and dealing with how Chivas just attacked them in transition was quite concerning, I think. Bit of an eye opener, maybe, is a better word for it. It was just general positioning at times was an issue, and it wasn't so much that you're chasing players who are doing clever movements that are pulling players around the pitch. It was sticking to a formation, but the line was bad. Like the defensive line was bad, and it was wonky. So players were able to step in. Chivas players for the first goal able to step in front and get shot away and score. So I think it was. I mean, am I being overly harsh, do you think? Because, I mean, they are playing a superior side.
Yeah, no, I think the signs of preseason definitely showed, especially in Forge's defensive line. Again, you want to give them a little bit of slack because it's their first, competitive game, and a lot of teams, it's not even like the Whitecaps. That the Whitecaps are in the middle of their preseason. A lot of teams haven't started their preseason yet in the CPL. I'm pretty sure preseason starts at the end of February.
Yeah.
So the Forge have had to start way earlier than any other CPL side, barring Cavalry as well, because they're going to play. But they're playing earlier than they have ever historically played, or prepared for a season. And they're facing a very tough team, Liga MX top team in Chivas Guadalajara. So obviously you want to give them some credit and some slack. But it's hard not to be a little bit nitpicky, because you know what Forge are capable of, and you see that defensive line. You see, the way that Matusala was so easily dragged out of position, and I believe in the first goal kept Cowell onside.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit disappointing in that sense. But I mean, again, they're just getting used to their sharpness. I did think, and I saw a tweet about this, said Forge are more than anything, those 3 goals showed that there's a huge Mandrakar James sized hole in that defense. And I kind of agree with that, where obviously, like I said, everything before with preseason, all of these, reasons and excuses. But if you had Mandrakar James in it, I don't think 1 or 2 of those goals would have gone in, even at this point in the season, just because he is that more experienced head. And I think he wouldn't have made some of the mistakes that we saw being made by Forge, like the players in Forge in the defense. And it could have been at least a bit closer for Forge. But I mean, overall, 3-1, you scored, and it was a really good goal scored by Taryn Campbell.
Really, really well. Good build up to it as well.
Exactly. Like that's the Forge football that we're used to. It goes to Tristan Borges on the left, and he puts an absolutely spectacular curved cross perfectly in the place for Taryn Campbell to just run on and just basically deflect it first time into the back of the
Campbell's movement as well, though, you say it was perfectly placed. His movement to get that space to get on the defender's back so that the defenders having to watch the cross and they lose Terran Campbell. They don't know where he is. It was really, really good centre forward play.
Yeah. And that's, again, man, it's sort of like, the little flashes of quality that we know of Forge, of, arguably the best CPL side and so far in history.
Yeah.
And so because of those flashes, I think it was even a little bit more disappointing because it wasn't like they weren't up for it. If it was like they weren't up for it, they weren't ready, whatever, you take a 3-0 loss and you're like, that's fair. What can you expect? They didn't look up for it. They didn't look, ready. But they did. Forge actually went, toe to toe in a lot of occasions and could have even brought it back to 3-2 with that chance that Jordan Hamilton had in the second half and missed.
Been, provided a bit more of a lifeline, wouldn't it? But it's unfortunate. It was a good bit of movement again, but just stretching a bit for the volley, wasn't he, and put it over.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's a game of fine lines, as former Whitecaps Carl Robinson would say, Whitecaps manager. And it's just about those slight differences in quality. Though it might not seem like that much, but those slight differences are worth their weight in gold. And that's what happens when you have a like a Cade Cowell come in. He can basically just do that, and it almost seemed effortless from him. Just in the way that he was playing with such confidence. He was playing with such focus, and just like his demeanor was of someone that is here to give their 100%. So I was super, super impressed by Cade Cowell, as was everyone. But Forge, they go next week to Guadalajara to face Chivas. It's always going to be a tall task for them, especially going to Mexico because of the fans, because of the environment. I mean, Tim Hortons Field, I was looking at tweets and stuff like that from people that were there. They said it was generous to give Forge 50% of the capacity that was there. It was a lot of Chivas fans. And there's a little bit of drama that was going on there because Forge didn't have a designated Chivas supporters section. A lot of Chivas fans just kind of spread out, and some Chivas fans were in seats that weren't theirs, and some Forge fans were unfortunately displaced, and a lot of them got angry and left, and there's a little bit of drama of that going on. I don't know exactly what's going on, and I don't want to, put too many claims out there, but these were just rumblings that I heard of that were happening. And that just goes to show how crazy Mexican fans can be to support their team. And that's away. That's, across all of the continental United States into Canada. And now Forge is going into the belly of the beast in Guadalajara. So it's going to be a very, very tough match. But more than anything, I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for them. Another great piece of experience for them to really see where the gap is between them as representing one of the best teams in the CPL and some of the best teams in other leagues like Liga MX. And it's unfortunate for Forge for them to have to face such a big team. It would have been interesting to see them play maybe a Honduran side or a Guatemalan side or something like that, like Motagua or something like that. Or Alajuelense, that would have been nice with the return of Magikarp James. But you can only play what you're given, and overall, I think it's going to be a great experience for Forge. Do you think they have some hope going into that game next week, Mike?
Maybe if Chivas underestimate them and just take the foot off the gas far too much, but you've got to imagine it's going to be one for the players to try and get something positive out of. The result, you'd imagine, will go Chivas's way, especially away from home as well. But if you can get a step up in quality from like the centre-back pairings in there, just general how they're operating together, like they may still concede a few goals, but if we can see an improvement on what they did in the last game, then you've got a bonus there. If we're getting something again out of Tristan Borges going forward, after last season's sort of disappointments of like sort of inconsistent form, like if we've got a player like that who can have a couple of really good moments in big games, could they be? I mean, Rubens Pasillas doesn't look like he'll be here, so we need the Forge need him to step up this season and recapture that form. And those bits around the pitch in different areas will be just important for the players themselves, but also the fans to see, like, okay, well, this is one of the biggest teams, but this season we haven't got much to worry about at home. We'll be ourselves, and let's see if we get a few more additions before the start of the season and try and knock Cavalry off their perch.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be more than anything a great warm up, I think, for the season. And like you said, they have to replace some additions. We'll talk about that more when we talk about our grading. But either way, not every team can say that they've played a top Mexican side twice before the season starts to get them primed and ready. And I think that gives them an advantage over everyone. You could even say including Cavalry, because it depends on whether you put Chivas and Orlando on the same pedestal. But I think either way, it's going to be a fantastic way for them to prepare for the 2024 CPL season. And looking to do that double again and make it 5 out of 6 maybe at the end of the season. But now we'll move on to the second match of the night, which was Vancouver Whitecaps against Tigres UANL. This was the game that I was at. This was the game that I traveled over from the mainland to the island.
So you got to tell us, like, what was it like? Because obviously you're at a lot of Whitecaps games in BC Place. What was it like around the grounds and from the fans in the stadium? Did it seem like a lot had travelled over? Was there a lot of Whitecaps fans, or did we have a lot of Pacific fans cheering them on? Like, how was it in the stadium?
It was great, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I got there a few hours early. I actually met up with friend of the show, Alex Gunge-Ruzik. We were on the same ferry over, and we did not plan that, so we traveled down to the stadium together. And already when we got there were Tigres fans setting up and everything. It was incredible. And as the doors opened and everything, the Tigres fans filed in super quickly. I think they were there for hours beforehand. And so it felt like a Tigres home match for a little while until more and more Whitecaps fans came in. There were actually quite a few Whitecaps fans. I'd say if you compare it to the Tigres, it was, I wouldn't say it was 50-50. I would say maybe 60% Whitecaps fans, 40% Tigres fans. Maybe even a little bit more, because I didn't get to see like clearly what was happening and on the grandstand either side of me. But it definitely sounded like at times like it was a Tigres home match, because those Tigres fans were loud. And they had their drums, they were chanting, they were screaming the entire 90 minutes. Even when Tigres were, a goal down losing for 88 minutes. Or weren't winning at least for 88 minutes. They were still chanting and screaming and everything. And the Southsiders, they came through. They had their banners, they had their flags, and they made a few chants that you could hear. But I mean, it was always a tough atmosphere to go against. Some of the more crazy Mexican fans that made the trip up to the island. But I did see a couple of Pacific fans that were there in solidarity with the BC side. A couple of Lakeside boys. I saw some purple scarves around. But the atmosphere was amazing, and it was really cool to see, the Whitecaps play there as the home side, because I've been there seeing them as the away side, where the Pacific are the home side. But that was the first time that we saw them as the home side. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic. It was obviously a much more, close environment, much more intimate because of how small the stadium is compared to BC Place. So it was a very, very cool experience. I enjoyed it a lot. And the best part was there was a lot of good football throughout the game. Surprisingly, some really good football from the Whitecaps, and not because they can't do it, but again because they're in preseason form. And Tigres going into this match, They were 5 matches into their clausura season, and they were undefeated.
Yeah.
They had 3 wins, 2 draws. So my like best case scenario realistically was a 1-1 draw. That was what I was telling people around me. That was me being hopeful, because I didn't know if the Whitecaps were up for it. But to my surprise, and to the surprise of many people, the Whitecaps were up for it and made some really, really good plays. I don't know if for you they surprised you in the way that they played against Tigres.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, they battled really well. As the guy, I forget who was commentating on it. But the combination for the goal with Gould, head down from Brian White, Krylak scores. It's like, well, there you go. That's the front three I've got. That's the front three that's doing it. And so it was nice to see that link up for them. But I think at times, Tigres were made some funny decisions with the way when they were attacking. There were times where I saw Vancouver were clearly the team that are in pre-season, where they're a little bit chaotic when they're out of possession and trying to get themselves organized quick, and not being as quick as they would be as you'd expect them after a few games of a season. And I think Tigres didn't really capitalize on that. They were taking quite a few long shots when they could have actually run at defenders and pulled them out. Takaoka had a really good game, I thought. But yeah, I was really impressed, because it was, like I say, it was a sign of one team who's in full mid-season flow and one team really starting, and Whitecaps did really well to raise up to the level and make those minor mistakes which every team does of any level when they're in their first match of the season. So it was really good.
Yeah, no, and speaking to head coach Vanni Sartini afterwards, he kind of acknowledged that, especially in the first half, you could sort of tell that it was preseason, not just even off the ball, like you were saying, but even on the ball, they were taking an extra touch when before they didn't need to take that extra touch, and they were a little bit frantic in how they wanted to build up. But eventually, like I would say between the 35th minute and the 75th minute, that was mostly dominated by the Whitecaps, and there was that goal that was disallowed by VAR for offside. That took quite a while, and both sides were jeering because they're like, "What the heck's going on?" Looking back at it now, I think it was the pass from Krylak to Schopf that was offside.
Yeah, I think so.
It was quite clearly offside. Don't know why it took so long. But yeah, the Whitecaps created a few chances. There was a chance where Pedro Vite almost put it on a plate for Brian White, and they had a few like 3-on-2s or like 3-on-3s that they looked like they would probably be likely to score, that they just missed out. It was that final ball again showing they're still in preseason form, which is unfortunate, because I think on the night, if you take it all, all things considered, like the Whitecaps deserve to go back to Monterrey with a lead, if not by multiple goals, because Tigres really didn't threaten all that much up until that free kick. And let's talk about that free kick, because goodness gracious, Andre Pierre Guignac loves to play against the Whitecaps.
Three
times he's played against the Whitecaps. He just loves scoring goals, but specifically against the Whitecaps, because 3 times he's played against the Whitecaps, 3 times he scored, and the last 2 times have been golazos. The last one was that like a scissor kick that he scored, and then this brilliant free kick that I was sitting in the press box and they were setting it up, and I saw the 2 Tigres players on the left side of the wall towards Takaoka's far post, where he was standing. And I looked to Alex and I said, Guignac those 2 players are going to run away as soon as the whistle sounds. Guignac is going to put it to Takaoka's far post, and he's going to put it with so much power into that side netting that Takaoka's not going to be able to do anything. And that's exactly what happened. And then Alex looked at me and I was like, I just knew. I just knew that was going to happen. But that ball went in, and the Tigres fans went wild. And, looking back at it now, that was super cool because they were loud anyways. But when that goal went in, the whole place just like 50 decibels above what it was before.
The
So
residents
again,
of Langford outside the stadium are like, "What? Is it an earthquake? What's going on?"
yeah, exactly. Probably thinking that there was a minor earthquake because of everything that was going on. One thing that happened before the game as well is I didn't see this, but apparently Alex heard from somebody else that Tigres fans like that when they were doing the little parade into the stadium, they lit
Mm.
flares outside.
Oh, really?
And Langford police got called and they had to go and shut it down because there was
Oh,
like
God.
a bunch of flares and smoke was going everywhere. And
Yeah.
obviously in BC, if you see a lot of smoke, there's a lot of concern.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty funny where just like people who aren't soccer fans and who don't know about Mexican fans must have been like,
Mm.
what in the world is going on?
Yeah, it's usually quite
Um,
quiet
yeah,
here.
it's a quiet little town. It's a very
Yeah.
quiet little town. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, no, a fantastic goal. Uh,
Mm.
Kind of took the wind out of the sails of the Whitecaps. I think they deserved more. But I mean, a 1-1 draw, like I said at the beginning before the game, I would have snatched that right out of your hand if you offered it to me.
Mm.
So I think that going into the second leg against Tigres, they can go in with some confidence because of how well they played. They can sort of build on that. But again, it's always tough to go into Mexican stadium against
Yeah.
Mexican fans, going into El Volcán in Monterrey. And if the Tigres fans were like that here in Langford,
Yeah.
imagine how they're like when they're right at home.
Yeah, exactly.
What I would do to be able to go there and watch that game.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if you are like me, where you feel like maybe they have a chance when they go to Mexico.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I wouldn't say I wouldn't be suggesting people put their money on it, but I think that they've got the Whitecaps have got the quality. Like Vanni Sartini's building a good side. That they're not making huge changes each year, so they know what they're doing. It's not like they're a brand new, lots of new players learning a new system, and you've got the build up of a season as everyone starts to gel and understand. So there's a lot of players who've come back from last year who know what they're doing, and they've got this one game, they've got the 1-1 draw, blow out the cobwebs, right? Okay, second match, let's go for it. And yeah, if they can deal with the atmosphere and they can try not and give Gignac a chance for a free kick on the edge of the box, then let's see what happens.
Yeah, Damir Krylak said a really good thing where it's like we just gotta calm down and manage those first 15
Mm,
minutes. If we can survive those first 15 minutes where the fans are gonna be the loudest and the team is gonna be like all
yeah,
revved up from the atmosphere and everything, we can survive that. We have a shot. So it'll
yeah,
be interesting to see if they manage to do that.
exactly. I
But
mean,
that is, yeah.
fans will be tough as well, though, on Tigres. If Tigres aren't winning at the end of the first half, going into the second, those fans are going to get like impatient. So,
Oh yeah, they're gonna get rowdy. They're gonna get rowdy. But that is it for our Champions Cup review. Now we're going to go into our sort of main attraction of the show today. We're going to be talking about grading. For those who can see the visuals and can see me, I'm doing my best middle school teacher impression with my attire right now because we're taking you back to school. We're taking you back to school, and we have some grading to do. We're going to go through each of the 8 teams, all of the transfers that they've made so far up to date. At the time of the recording, it is the 9th of February, and today was a very busy day for CPL transfers. Kind of glad that we had to push this back until today because
Yeah,
I would have felt like we would have missed a huge chunk of the transfer
definitely.
news and the transfers in general had we not recorded after today, or at least after the announcements today. So kind of glad that that happened overall. Um, but we're going to go with over all of the 8 teams and their transfers, and our rubric is going to be as follows. We're going to look at their incomings and grade their incomings. We're going to look at their outgoings, or in their retention. Sorry, we're going to look at their retention and grade their retention. We're going to look at their additions, and then we're going to finish up with what they potentially could get as a grade at the very end. So if things continue to go as they go, maybe they make a couple more signings, maybe they don't make a couple more signings. This is sort of our feeling as like where they'll probably fall by the end of the transfer window, aka by the start of the season.
Yeah.
So first up, we're going to go over the side from Ottawa, Atletico Ottawa. On the screen, you can see the incomings and outgoings. I'm not going to go through all of them, or else this is going to be a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But for those who can see, there they are. For those who can't see, look it up on Wikipedia. It's very easy to find. But Mike, I'll start with you. Let's get the grades until the very end, but let's just talk in general, I guess, about the transfer business for Atletico Ottawa. They've signed a lot of good players, but they've also let a few of their best players leave as well.
Yeah.
How have you found their transfer activity so far?
Yeah, I think it can be all encapsulated around our questions about Christopher Gonzalez getting his contract renewal of, is he going to be a little bit more attacking than he was last year and push this team out and send them on? Because it from the from the signings version, yes, it's going to be more attacking. From the outgoings, well, he's got no more defenders. So like this team's on paper, they're going for goals.
Yeah. No, you look at that and you see, pretty much everyone bar Ryan Yesley, the goalkeeper,
Yeah,
and I guess Liberman Torres, the Ecuadorian that they brought in. Everybody
yeah,
else is more attack minded. Abubakar Sissoko is a midfielder, but he can do quite well, in ball progression moving forward.
yeah.
So yeah, the incomings are all saying we didn't score enough last year. We're going to make sure that we do. We're going to make sure that we
Yeah.
are good at attacking. And then looking at the outgoings, Mike, I mean, some of the big names are obviously Diego Espejo, Miguel Acosta, Jean Aniasi, Sean Melvin leaving. A lot of them were loans, like
Yeah.
Espejo, Luke Singh, Asi, and Iliadis. So it's not the worst thing for them to sort of have them leave. But looking at the players that they have retained, what have you thought? And then you can end off with a grade you gave for retention for Ottawa.
So I think, yeah, like you say, it's loans that were like, for want of a better word, the issue. Like they losing Miguel Costa, Luke Singh, and Diego Espejo, and Johnny LC, who was playing as a wing back. Like that's the core. That's all you've got is we met left. Like I mean, McDonald Neva's gone as well, I think, or is he? They're not sure about whether there hasn't been a confirmation if he will come back. So, I mean, this is going to be an entirely new defense. We're assuming Mateo Debrian will go into left wing back. Don't have a right wing back. Carl House obviously retired. So it's it just the fact that there's so many first team starters that aren't coming back is really, really bizarre, which is why, I mean, if we're going to jump into the grades now, retention wise, I gave them a C just because it's a big hit of first team players that went. And the players that you see that have stayed, obviously there's the quality ones that going forward, like Ollie Bassett, blah, blah. But there's a big chunk of reserve players who aren't. They're not. I can't imagine them, like some of these players, being relied upon as first team players. So it's required a big rotation in the squad.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from. I gave them a little bit of a better grade in retention. I gave them a B. Because you are right that the defense is looking a little bit shaky, but because most of them were loans and you can't really, expect them to retain that. I think in the players that they lost, actually, that they either declined or that they transferred out. I don't think it's that bad. Obviously, Miguel Acosta is a big one. The loan of Diego Espejo, Gianni Dos Santos leaving, you could say, is a big one as well. But I don't think it's too bad for them, considering that the loans, they were always going to expire, and it's tough for them to be able to keep some of those players, especially Diego Espejo coming from Spain.
Yeah.
But I think it's like you mentioned, they still kept a lot of their core. I mean, with Ollie Bassett still there, you could always say that's always a success every season that they can keep
Yeah.
Ollie Bassett at the club. So I think overall they did fairly well in making sure some of the big players haven't left. So that's why I gave them a B.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
Now,
I'm being harsh as well, defensive wise, because obviously Tyre Walker's still there, who you'd imagine is going to take a step up this year. And I'm being a little bit harsh by saying Carl Wiemet's the only one there. I think obviously he had some impressive performances last year when he was getting chances, so maybe he's obviously going to take a step up this year.
no, yeah, and Tier Walker was an outside shout for a lot of people for
Yeah.
under 21 player of the year, because when he did play, he did step up for Ottawa, and defense is a very important part for Ottawa. And if you
Yeah.
have a good young defender coming up, and
Yeah,
you need
really
to make
important.
sure that your defense is strong, he's someone that I think that Carlos Gonzalez can rely on. So yeah, I think he's due to have a big season. In terms of additions, and we're gonna go over a grading of additions. I'll start because it's pretty easy for me. I mean, you look at everything that they've managed to bring in, and I can't think of a better transfer window for them that's possible, really, at least so far. I look at all of those players and they all seem at least like if not hits, at least
Mm.
some very solid signings. I mean, Mateo de Brienne is one of the signings of the season, one of the first signings they made, and one of the signings of the season.
Yeah.
Bringing back Valour Tabla and all the magic they can do,
Yeah.
incredible. Chris Twardek, I don't know too much about him, but from what little I saw, having another attack-minded winger come through, he seems like he's pretty decent and build up. He can be like a bit tricky. He scored some goals abroad. He seems like a decent player. I'm very excited for Liberman Torres, and the reason why is because he comes from Independiente del Valle in Ecuador, and that is a hub for
Yeah.
really good young Ecuadorian talent. Like that is slowly turning for me into like La Masia of South America, because so many of the players that go through that academy and go through that team are turning out to be stars in England and Germany and France.
Yeah.
Really, really good players. And he went to Villarreal, and he's being loaned from Villarreal. So he was good enough for a top team in Spain to be like, he's one for the future. Let's bring him in. And now he's spending a season in Atletico Ottawa, and we get to see what a top prospect for a huge Spanish team coming from a very, very like well-renowned academy in South America will look like. So that for me is probably one of the most underrated signings of the season for Atletico Ottawa. I'm very, very excited to see. He's a tall boy, he's 6'1". He's a defensive midfielder, and I'm excited to see how he pairs alongside El Toro, and he gets to learn from El Toro and Zapater. So yeah, I think that's super, super solid. And then Yesley, like he was my Golden Glove winner. Sissoko, I think he was underrated at forward, just all across the board. Such a good window. Maybe because of the news of Ryan Yesley coming in came today, so it just hyped me up more. So maybe this is a little bit, overinflated, but I gave them an A+. I gave them a straight A+ in additions, because like I said, I can't think of them being able to do much better, bar maybe bringing in some defense, but there's still time left, right? So far for what they've done, I don't think anyone has done better.
No, I mean, I've gone with A-, just because I'm more cynical than you, I guess. purely based on the defense, the fact that they need to bring in some defenders. I can maybe some of these players. I mean, Jean Anielesi was a winger, and he became a really defensively strong wing back with Ottawa. So maybe some of these players maybe He's got ideas to develop them in a different way than what they have been in other teams, and help them to develop their defensive responsibilities as well as have their attacking flair on offer. We don't know, but they got it. They need some centre backs. Like they have to sign some, which is why it's there. That's why I went with the minus, because there's still work to be done.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, looking at what the potential is, I see that you changed last minute.
I did. I'm looking at the wrong bit. We'll have to skip through these. We'll have to go to the grading so I can read mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Messy work here.
No worries. But looking at what we gave them for retention, looking at what we gave them for additions, you look at the potential that they might have come the end of the window. I gave them slightly less than an A plus. I gave them an A because for the reasons of I don't know if they can bring in all of the players that they need to fill up the gaps that have left, like with loan expiries, unless they go crazy at the end. But I do think they'll be good enough to be able to bring in a few defenders to help out the gaps that have been left behind by the players that are left, and especially with Diego Espejo being one. Think they can find somebody to sort of take that position from him. I think overall, yeah, they have gone leaps and bounds to what they were in 2023. So I think Atletico Ottawa are going to have one of the strongest transfer windows of the entire league, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, now that I've organized my thing, the defense just screams out to me. I'm looking at the squad list at the moment, and there's 4 defensive players on that list. One of them's Abubakar Sako, who I don't think is a defender. Okay, he's exciting when he goes forward. He's got pace, but I don't think he's a defender. So we got Maxime Tissot, who's been a good servant, but he's not. I think they need to upgrade, and they need to give Ty Walker players around him that are going to improve, because they were defensively sound for long periods, but fell apart last year, and they and gave up big goals. And they've just gone attacking so far with their vision in their scouting and their recruitment to date. But yeah, they've got a lot of work to do with this defense, and it's going to be quite a new defense. So if he was struggling with the players he knew last year to get them consistently defensively solid as he expected, how long is it going to take to get a whole new set of players with a young player brought in as one of the more experienced in this system?
Fair. Yeah, no, it's true. It's tough to have a solid defense, especially that's what you are known for, is having a very defense oriented philosophy. To have a defense be primed and ready to do that, because if that is what your philosophy is, and defense kind of has to be your best area, and then the attack just has to be really good on the counters.
I think this could make Ottawa quite exciting games to watch for a neutral now, because before it'd be like, oh, it's going to be very gritty. This could open up the game a little bit more for the neutrals.
Yes, exactly. Now Ottawa's going to be a team that I definitely am going to be excited to tune in for, with all of the signings that they've made. So overall, those are our grades on the screen: retention, additions, and potential. Now let's move on to Cavalry FC, going over their transfer activity. Again, I'll start just in general, looking at what they've done. I think they've done some really good business. I think that they've brought in some pretty decent players. I mean, there's one player in particular, Diego Gutierrez, who was my underrated player of the season last season, but also bringing in some youth in Lucas Diaz, the Portuguese Canadian dual national from Sporting, bringing in some former CPL players like Tobias Warchowski, And another young player today was announced. Jack Barrett from the Everton reserves was brought in, and you look at the outgoings. It doesn't seem like they've lost many
No.
starters or star players, if at all. So I think overall it was a pretty solid transfer window so far for Cavalry. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, 100%. Like this one is Cavalry's a little bit different for me to a lot of the other teams in this league. Their business so far, because they are just okay. We've brought in Diego Gutierrez to increase the quality that we've got in the midfield, but these other players are okay. Well, we've had to let some depth pieces go. These are some new depth pieces that are going to push our first team players, and so they're not going through any form of transition. This is freshening up the competition below the starters to get more out of the whole squad, I think, which is why I think everyone's quite bullish over Cavalry for going into the season.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go into our gradings. The gradings are on the board right now,
Pretty
and
straightforward.
it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. I don't even know if we have to go that deep into it. Basically, for myself and Mike, we have A's across the board. A
Yeah,
in retention, A in additions, A in potential. Because again, they didn't lose any starters. They kept the biggest one, Dan Klomp, seems to
exactly.
be staying, which is huge for Cavalry because that was the one that everyone thought they're gonna lose him. Who are they gonna be able to
Yeah,
bring to fill that gap? So far, none.
yeah,
So, they don't have a situation like Pacific has right now, which we'll talk about when it's Pacific's
exactly.
turn.
Pacific Forge, like,
Exactly. Forge are already going through with Magikarp James. Yeah, in retention, they're golden. Again, in additions, they are already a championship winning side. They've already proved that last year. But they brought in some really good players. Another backup striker since Joe Mason left
yeah,
in Tobias. They brought in a rock solid midfielder in Diego Gutierrez. Lucas Diaz seems like he can be a good attacking winger. We've seen how good attacking wingers can be under Tommy Wheeldon Jr. last season with Gauthier and Tigny. Maybe Lucas Diaz is going to want to try to follow in the steps of a Gauthier and Tigny, playing in more attacking positions as a young forward. And yes, yeah, overall, I think it's a very solid window for Cavalry where they didn't have to do too much. They don't have to, reinvent the wheel. They don't have to have
no,
these huge turnovers. They just needed to fill a few of those gaps that were missing. And I think they've pretty much filled them all. And
yeah.
that's why for me, it's just A's across the board. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, if a guy like Tommy Wheeldon Jr. and Cavalry look just quite consistently at the moment, just look like a team that are prepared for the players who are going to leave, and they already have an idea of who they're going to bring in once that happens. So, like, it just seems seamless. We'll have to see how these players get on. Obviously, I mean, Leighton Brooks, I know nothing, very little of from the A League coming across. Tobias Wachkowski, we've mentioned, hasn't played professionally for a while, but it's not like he was without commitment when he was on the pitch. So you'd imagine that'll be still in his blood. So, you've got players like Maël Henry, who showed like he got his chances after his low move and showed the quality in getting the ball forward to players like Ali Musi that are still there. So, like, this is a really good team.
Yeah, it's genuinely going to be tough
Mm,
for teams to be able to try to dethrone Cavalry in the league because they are now an even stronger team than they were
mm.
last season. A lot of teams have strengthened. Don't get me wrong; it's
Yeah,
not easy, as we'll talk about at the very end.
yeah,
But it's so hard to root against Cavalry right now, at least in the regular season with everything that they've done so far.
yeah.
But now we will move on to the third team, which is Forge FC, the winners of the North Star Cup last season, the biggest rivals for Cavalry, you'd say, in the league historically. They've had a rather quiet window, at least in terms
Mm,
of numbers, but in terms of quality, especially in the outgoings, it's been a bit of a gutting season or off season for Forge because they've lost only 4 players, but three of those 4 players were starters for Forge. And obviously, we talked about Magikarp James. Wubens Passius, we still have no idea where he's going. He was rumored to Nashville, but I think that trail's run cold, or at least nothing. There's
Yeah, it
no
seems to
new
have.
updates for it. Reza Rama went to Europe. Abubakar Sissoko, we know, went to Ottawa. And they've brought in 2 players that one of them Forge fans will be very familiar with in Eliman Cisse. He is a player that I really liked for Forge when he was playing there between I think he was in the first squad 2019 up until 2021, and then he went to Africa to play for a few seasons. He comes back in. He was a player that can play basically in any position. He was good as a ball progressing midfielder. He was good as a defensive midfielder. He was good at creating chances and even scoring a few goals for Forge. So overall, good player. I mean, Nano Poku or Apoma, I think is how you pronounce his name. Comes with experience as well, quite a bit of experience, if I recall, into the league, and more of an attacking player as well as a winger. He's somebody that I think is a replacement for Wubens Passius, since Bobby had the whole issue of 3 strikers with only 1 striker position. Had to force Passius as a winger. Now they've properly brought a winger in, a Poma in. But overall, is it what you think you were expecting from a Forge FC so far, or are you still left a little wanting?
Yeah, again Forge of this strange team. Part of it was how long it's taken as well to keep. Like, they brought out this when they first re-signed a lot of these players. I think, like, to dwell on, but it was a big number of players straight away off the bat. Everyone's coming back. Fantastic. It was at 15 players will be returning next season. It's like, oh, this is a consistent Forge. Once again, everything will be fine. But then Alexander Ashinyota Johnson took a long time to decide whether to stay. Reza Ramos as well eventually left. Mandrakar James has gone quickly. Pasillas has gone quickly. And that just, for me, threw up a lot of questions about and the fact that there were very few signings, like we said, and they've only just really come in. I think CC was early this week, or was it late last week?
I think it was early. No, it was late last week, I believe.
So it was getting to the point where, like, and we've said it about Forge as well. It's like, is this the point where at some point they're having to almost prepare for the fact that is Bobby still going to be here forever? Like, and there seemed to be a lot of hesitation from big names, a little bit of hesitation on signings, and that's what I think. It's more of a feeling that makes me grade them lower than maybe a lot of I imagine a lot of Forge fans and maybe a lot of other CPL fans will. But I just feel like they didn't have the best of regular seasons. Obviously, they come back and they win in the final. Like, so it's not like they had they had a successful season, but it didn't seem quite as straightforward as they would have obviously planned, and they would have liked, and that just crept into this off season for me a bit.
Fair. Well, let's jump into the grading for Forge FC, starting with retention. As you can imagine, in terms of retention, we haven't given them the best of grades. Mike, you gave them a D. I gave them a C. For me, the difference between giving them a D and a C was Ashinori Johnson. I think if Ashinori Johnson would have left, I would have given them a D. The fact that he stayed was enough to pip me to a C. But I still think, I mean, losing Magikarp James, arguably your best defender, Wubens Passius, you're one of the most exciting attackers in the CPL. Razor Rama, you're rock solid right back. He was so tough to beat, and he was hard hitting. He got stuck in. Abubakar Sissoko, again, an underrated player, I think, in the midfield for Forge. It's hard to lose those players and think that, yeah, they've done a decent job in terms of retention, at least for me.
And they've lost Plan B of Mandrakar James. Just get yourself forward, buddy. And they're rolling with the same attack. Really, obviously, you mentioned Ampama, who's come in. We'll find out more about him as the season goes on. Benny Badivanga got a lot better as he really started to pick up speed quickly once he was getting on the field, but you're going with Tristan Borges, David Chouanier. These players didn't have great years last year, and a lot of last season was Carl Becker, especially the first half of the season. Carl Becker putting everyone on his back and driving them forward and trying to get them going. And without Mandrakar James, without Raz Rama, these leaders in the team, again, that could fall on Carl Becker, who's another year older. And if Tristan Borges and David Chouanier don't pick up, don't like improve on last season, they could be in another situation where they're struggling for goals and they're struggling to create things. So I still feel there's a little bit needs to be done to maybe shake up this squad a little bit and to sort of inject a little bit more life back into it. Like it sounds really ridiculous to say about the team that won the tournament and had a real like played decently against Chivas, but I'm just thinking of it as a season-long thing. Some of these players they weren't playing at a level where you're like, well, they're playing for the top. That's a player that will play for the top side in the league. There was a lot of players who had some good games, and then had games where you probably wouldn't say, oh, you wouldn't picture them as a Forge starter. And yeah, Bobby's gonna have to make them that this year.
Yeah. So that makes sense why I gave them a C in additions.
Yeah.
I also gave them a C in additions just because obviously CC is a good player. I really like him. And he is someone that I think will fit well back into the Forge system that he already knows pretty well. Opoku Opoma, he was somebody that I think, he was playing in Belgium. He played for Royal Antwerp and played a couple Europa League matches. He played one, I think, against Spurs. So he had some he's played in some pretty big games. He played in Germany for Fortuna Dusseldorf. And so he knows how to play in some pretty big leagues and pretty big occasions. So I think it'll be another, again, Forge need those big game players because that's what allows them to win in playoffs and stuff like that and to continue that. So I think he's a solid signing. I would have given them a B if maybe they would have made at least one more signing in terms of defense. Mostly just you need somebody to come in for Mandrakar James. I think if you would have brought somebody in center back that's maybe worth at least a little bit of what the quality that Mandrakar James had, then I would have given them a B. But only two players, and with all the players that you left so far, it is a C. But looking at potential, we both gave them the same thing. We both gave them B grades. And I think that is for both of us, keeping in mind that they probably will have to bring in somebody to replace Mandrakar James and somebody to probably replace Razart Rama. You could say that with the CC and Ampoma, they've sort of replaced Sissoko and Passius. Now it's time to shore up that defense, and then I think it'll be a B potential. I don't know if it'll be as good as maybe they were before, but I think it'll be good enough for them to not lose their status as favorites, especially in the playoffs for the 2024 season.
Yeah, I agree. And that sort of chance to bump up, like you say, like you've got the chance to see some of these players play against Chivas to see how they get on, see how he feels about his squad, and then make these adjustments. So we've still got time after these games before the season kicks off, where you'd expect that he's, if anything's going to have crossed Bobby's mind over like, are these players the ones I want to roll with for the year, or should we bring this player in? That decision will probably be made once these games are over.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They probably will make some more moves after CONCACAF's done and before the season start.
Yeah.
Moving on to Halifax Wanderers. They had a lot of outgoings and only 2 incomings. So overall, so far, it seems like Halifax knew exactly what they wanted to do. They knew exactly what they wanted for the team in terms of the players that they didn't need, and they had plenty of players, as you can see on the graphic right now, plenty of players that they deemed surplus to requirements. And a lot of people were a little bit concerned because they looked a little thin. And so far, they've only made 2 signings. 2 signings that, I mean, one of them was very highly rumored for a long time, finally got confirmed, and another one that just happened in the last few days. So far, Mike, what are you thinking about Halifax overall about their transfer activity?
The little concerned. There no. I know we've spoken with people obviously about Halifax, and Josh Healy's came on and said, "Well, there's players there that weren't gonna make big impacts in the first team in the future, so they're moving on again." But this is another big rotation of the squad. Despite, I mean, you're losing Mo Omar's big, obviously, and Jeremy Gagnon-Lapierre was a good player. He's a good player. But personally, I prefer Mo Omar, so I don't think it's a just because of the way I think he complements Caligari with the with his movement around the pitch. I don't think Laferre is going to. He doesn't have that mobility that Mo Omar has. He's going to want the ball more. So it could work in a different way, and we'll see how those two go. But I really liked how Mo Omar and Caligari sort of complemented each other, which is not a hit on Laperre. I just think it's the fit that I'm not 100% sure on as a duo. But then, like you say, there's a big list of players who didn't have regular game time that have gone, and now we're going to bring new players in. Are they going to bring a whole load more new players, or is this going to be a thinner squad? And when you're playing Patrice Kaiser football, like, it might be nice to have a bit of rotation in there to keep up with it all. So I'm just a little bit. I've got a lot of question marks about Halifax, not in like a negative way, but just on, I'm really not sure what's going to happen there.
Yeah, that's very true. And you know what? Let's go straight into the grading for this, because like you mentioned, a lot of players leaving the squad. I mean, they had 10 players leaving. Uh Big ones like Mo Omar, like you mentioned. I mean, Callum Watson was somebody
Yeah,
that was sort of an impact player for them that left to Chattanooga in MLS Next Pro, I believe that's where
that's
they
right.
play. Teo Colom has left, Jake Ruby, Armand Wilson, the big one that we talked about, Doniel Henry. So I think now looking back on it, I think I was a little generous in their retention. I think it's because I thought that a lot of those players, like you said, they weren't really starters. They were more like either impact subs or just rotation pieces. So I didn't think it was that bad that they lost that many. But thinking about, like you mentioned, the Streets Geyser football is very demanding. It's very demanding. It is very like highly organized. It's super fluid, and you're going to get some injuries probably through it, especially
Yeah.
as some players are still adjusting to it physically. So I think maybe C's a fair shout from you rather than my B. But I still think, keeping a lot of the main players, the stars that we saw. I mean, Dan Nimick is the big one,
Yeah.
obviously. The fact that he's looks like he's staying, and he has Kyle Lowry about beside him as well. Caligari still
Yeah.
there. Massimo
Happy for them.
Ferrin,
Yeah.
Aiden Daniels, like they still have that core. So I still
Exactly.
think
That
it's still,
starting 11's great, like, pretty much.
yeah. That starting that I think that was what it was like. The starting 11 was fantastic,
Yeah.
and I think moving on to the additions. I mean, bringing Gagnon Lapierre, I think is going to be a very exciting fit into into that midfield with Caligari. I don't think I have the same reservations as you
Yeah.
do. I think that they might. I think that they will probably complement each other quite well, especially since Gagnon Lapare is very hardworking. He's very up and down,
Mm.
and Caligari is more like that elegant player that we like to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think they will be able to complement each other well. Gagnon Lapare will do all the dirty work, and Caligari can keep doing his beautiful football. At least in my eyes, and in my dream world, that's what's going
Yeah.
to be going on. But you gave them a C in their additions. Is that because it's only been 2 players so far?
Yeah, just the fact that as much as I profess my love for Thiago Coimbra, I thought it like plenty towards the end of the year for his potential. They need another centre forward in the squad. Dan Nimick and Cavalry again are now going to be the like 90-minute players week in, week out. And and like I said before, like Jeremy Gagnon Lavare. I hope for that. Hope for Halifax. I mean, like that it does fit, and you're right. But part of me just doesn't quite get it, and maybe Ramprasad and him might rotate a bit alongside Caligari. I don't know, but just it's not that I don't think that they've got a good team. Like we said, the starting 11 on paper is very similar, like to last year, and is high quality. But there's just little bits around it where I'm not sure, just not quite sure, and I don't know where these players are going to get a break and get a little bit of rest and because it'd be nice for those like at times. Aidan Daniels, Massimo Ferrin are going to need to come off after 60 minutes. Like they can't keep forcing him on and forcing him on. Thiago Coimbra will run himself into the ground after an hour. There's got to be some way of rotating these players around, and it's going to be a whole new set of players again. Patrice Geyser did it last year. He got them all playing, like a whole new team. He got them playing, so it could be. That's why I've gone with potential for B, because he's got it in him. He can bring in these players, and he can get this squad like got to get this squad gelling together. So I'm just waiting to see who it is, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it was sort of the same thing for me. I
Mm.
was looking right now at the list of players that they have right now after all of the changes, and they have 4 defenders, and that is a starting defense, and they
Yeah.
have no one else. So definitely a little bit of concern there, especially in the style of play that they're playing. But I gave them a potential B as well because I'm assuming that they're going to bring at least 2 or 3 defensive players in as covers, because you can't expect everyone to be Iron Man and play 90 minutes of every single game, all 28 games plus playoffs. So I'm assuming more defenders are going to be able to come in. The midfield looks pretty much solid, maybe bringing in one more player for depth. And then, like you mentioned, a backup, center forward. I mean, Massimo Ferrin, I guess you could say he could play a striker as well in a pinch. But definitely, I think a proper number 9 behind Thiago Coimbra to give him some competition, because I think that's what helped him kind
Yeah.
of come into his own, having Theo Colom there. And obviously, he came out the better. But I think another center forward will
Yeah.
probably be needed as well. So quite a few already. We're saying like 4, 5, 6 extra signings there needed
Yeah.
for Halifax. But like you mentioned, they did last year. I'm sure they can do it again this year. Just bring in 6 players and be like, okay, here it is. Now get involved.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for Halifax until those signings come in to see what they'll be looking like at the start of the season. Now we're going to move on to Pacific and their transfer activity so far. A very interesting one there because, I mean, we were talking about Forge being gutted. Pacific, you could say, have been equally gutted, maybe even more in terms
Oh,
of how
this is
gutted it.
yeah.
It's a bit of a toughie there. That one you can debate amongst yourselves which one has had a more gutting time between Pacific and Forge. But yeah, looking overall, this transfer activity doesn't fill me with much confidence for
Mm.
Pacific. I mean, granted, they had a really good and deep squad to begin with. So even though they might have not brought too many players in, they already had some players that were ready to step up into some of the positions that have been left. But still, even still, overall, I still think it's a bit of a tough one for James Merriman. I don't know. I'm thinking you probably feel the same way, Mike.
Definitely. They've really. I mean, when you lose Amir Didic and Manny Aparicio in the same window, that's like a gut punch. Struggle for goals last year from their centre forwards. They've both gone. Isangar and Gennaro Daniel's gone. And you look at what's left in this squad now, and yeah, there's quality still, obviously. Like defensively, they've only lost one player. It's a big player, but they've still got 3 top defenders in that lineup. So it's not that they've crumbled all over the pitch, but there's your leader in Didic has gone. Your best central midfielder has gone. There's gaps in how the midfield was getting the ball to the forward line. That hasn't really been addressed. Pierre Lamotte has come back. They haven't got that creative passing player in the midfield still that's that's exciting into the final third. Sean Young, Stephen Yates, really good on the ball, but once you get into that final third, they're not as creative, and they haven't got that little extra bit that Manny Aparicio did. They haven't got that little extra bit that some other teams you can look around the league have got in those sort of more attacking areas. They're much better as more eights, maybe. And then you look at the forward line, you've got 3 players now. Josh Hurd didn't have his best year last year. Adonijah Reid was probably one of the better striker out of the 3. I think maybe you'll agree, but he's not a striker, I don't think. Like, that's still to work. And Ivan Salouf. So obviously Salouf's got quality. A lot of the creativity is going to be on his shoulders again until we find out what happens with some of these players. And Dom, who's recently been signed, a lot of what I'm seeing, very, very limited, and Will had, is he looks like he's going to be another player who's going to be slightly deeper in the midfield, but can get the ball forward. So it's not a player who can play in like sort of like number 10 position. They haven't got that still. They're missing a centre back. It's just really harsh on this team, and it's going to really test. I mean, if James Merriman can improve on this team, like improve on the position Pacific were last season, that's going to be an incredible job.
Yeah, especially with, like you mentioned, the players that have left. I mean, let's go into the gradings. I don't think there's going to be too much surprise in terms of the grades that we have given them, because they have lost Manny Aparicio and Amir Didic, and like you mentioned, even though they weren't scoring, free scoring center forwards, Easton Ngaro and Gennaro Daniels, we both gave them a D in retention. We both just think that losing Amir Didic, who, I mean, if you look at CPL by the numbers account on Twitter, he does a really cool thing about like weighted percentile average with stats about best players in each position. Amir Didic was apparently the best player in the league, according to his metrics, and they've now lost him. And he is reportedly going to Norway. I think like 2 hours ago, Josh Denning broke it that he was flying over to Norway now. So he seems to be finding a home in Europe. But yeah, Manny Aparicio probably MLS. I'd be surprised to see him with an CPL side. That would be a huge shock.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, I don't think we can give them much better than a D, given everything that they've sort of let go. Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one. And then in additions, we differ. You gave them a D. You were not impressed. And then I gave them a C. I am curious why you gave them a D in additions.
2 things. I think part of this is they're falling behind. I think they maybe didn't realize the task at hand. So it's been a little bit of a slow growth. So maybe they are weighing up all their options, but part of me thinks, okay, I don't think you realized how many people were going and how many like key players were definitely out the door. And also that at this point, I don't think they haven't fully addressed what they've lost and what they were lacking last year. These players will come in and add some like in quality and depth in certain areas, but they're not going to improve on how long it went with Pacific, where they're only getting like 1-0 wins and the odd goal every game after such a good run, when they just couldn't find these opportunities for the forward players. They haven't addressed the fact that their best centre backs, like their key centre back has gone. It's just these areas. There's still a lot of work to do, which is going like it's going to, and they've run at a point when they're running out of time. They can't bring in Canadian Premier League based players because they've already got themselves organised. Like other teams got the jump on them. So yeah, it's going to be doing a lot of shopping around. I mean, when we've spoke with Phil DeSantis, he said, yeah, it's like this online shopping. Like when you bring in players from abroad, they're going to be doing that now. They're going to have to do that a little bit more than probably they would have wanted.
Yeah, that's true, especially because of the nature of how these players have left. And with how many of players have already been picked up by other CPL squads, it's like really, I don't know how much is left for you to be able to buy here domestically. You're gonna have to go do a little bit of online shopping, window shopping to try to bring in some quality to make up for it. I mean, I gave them a C mostly because of their latest signing in Ali and Dom. He was, when he was younger, he was apparently an exciting prospect when he was in the second league of France with Stade Reims. He helped them promote to Ligue 1. And then he went to back to the Ligue 2 in Caen and then Auxerre. And then I think his career started to kind of crumble a little bit from there, going to Romania, going to Serie C in Italy, where he only played 2 games for like a month and then left, and then finding a bit of a home in Finland before coming to Pacific. So a player with a lot of experience, especially when he was younger.
Yeah.
You know, playing for Stade Reims, which is now a Ligue 1 side. It's always good to have in your team with that European experience. Don't know if he still necessarily has it because of the way his career's gone. He probably still has that ability. I'll just be interested to see if he can put it on consistently for Pacific. But yeah, aside from that, I mean, it's nice to have like Sean Melvin back, I guess. You know, BC boy.
That one's a really weird one as well, isn't it? Like, I was just thinking, like, because we said before, like with Emil Gazdov, are you going to back him and just put a young player in, or are you going to bring in a clear number one and say have another year behind? Sean Melvin's neither of those two options. It's a really strange one.
It is. It feels a little bit like Kyrian Basket 2.0, where it's like you don't really know who's the number one and what's going to happen with the other keeper. And then Dario Zanata, again, another little BC homecoming there. Attacking player that I don't know all that much of. I know that he was through the Whitecaps Academy and then left, and then danced around in Europe and some of the leagues there. I don't think it was too many major leagues. I think it was mostly minor leagues before coming back. But yeah, overall hasn't been all that impressive for me so far. And I mean, it makes sense then why we both gave them C potential. I'm curious for you, because you gave 2 Ds for retention and additions, what your hope might be to be able to pull it up to a C before the start of the season.
I just think that they're going to have to make moves. A new forwards can come in. I think they're going to have learned from the excitement of bringing in Easton Ungaro that fell flat, the potential of Genario Daniels that fell flat, So I think they are an intelligent club. I think they are trying to, they operate in quite a sensible way, and then they have clear what they want to do. So I think that they will learn from some of these bits of some of these signings that haven't gone well, and the players that they come in. I think we can probably expect a little more from a centre forward coming in from a goal return, simply from what we had from Ongaro and Janari Daniels last year, because it has to be better. Like, I just, like, part of me just thinks it's got to be a bit better. It's another year where they've had where things have gone really well at times. James Merriman was also really just like got quite elaborate with his team going into the playoffs, like how he was it wasn't just right 4-3-3, let's go. It was like he was doing different things with it and adapting, and that gives me a lot of confidence that he's got the ability to try and get a little bit more out of some other players. I mean, C is not a massive jump. I'm not, yeah, but I just feel that there's something in this club that, and the staff there, that they can still get something out of what they've got and make better decisions on the rest of their recruitment.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, they're going to be forced. They have to. There's no way that they don't reinforce unless they really want to fall down the table. But I think overall, yeah, I don't think it's going to be to the quality of. I mean, at least I would be very surprised if they bring in somebody a like for like replacement for Didic and for Manny Aparicio, because those are two of the best players in the league, and the two of the best players that we've seen in the league, in the entire history of the league so far. So I don't think it'll get much better for them. That's why I gave them a C as well. And unless they pulled some worldies from under their belts, I don't think it's gonna be tough for them to be able to really improve all that much after being gutted so hard. So, I mean, here's hoping, but I wouldn't be surprised if Pacific don't have the greatest of seasons for 2024. Let's move on now to Valour, a team that, if for those who can see the board, I spent quite a bit of time making that board, drawing it up.
That font's got a lot smaller.
Yeah, the font has got a lot smaller because 16 outgoings, 10 incomings. It's been a busy time at Valour FC. I mean, it gives your head a spin looking at all of this. And Mike, as the resident Valour fan, what do you make of this? Just basically just like the word vomit they see in front of you with all of the names that have been going in and out of the door at Valour.
They're testing me. They're really testing me. The Ryan Yesley news as well earlier on today. Like, it's huge. This club are losing all of. They had a few key players that the fans love, and they are slowly losing all of them. And there's a few. So all these players coming in to, as far as we're still led to believe, it will be July, is it, when they'll finally play in Winnipeg? They've got a lot of work to do, and there's just still because there's so many names. It's not the same as it was with Halifax last year, because this just looks like a lot of just random players. I don't look at this and go, okay, he's done that. This player's here because he's going to fit into this. Obviously, he's going to partner really well with so and so. It's just, right, here's a lot of new players. Let's give this. Let's write this out. And I think the biggest thing. I saw a little clip of Ryan Yesley having an interview after being unveiled with Ottawa, and he's saying that coming here, being closer to home, they're fine. But having and being in the, I can't remember. I don't want to. This is in his exact quote because I can't remember fully. But it sounded something along the lines of, "And the better coaching environment will help me progress in my career." And that's what really worries me about Valour, because all these players are going to need to get gelled together. They're all going to need to find a new way of playing, because Phil DeSantis is going to have to change a lot of what happened last year. And at the moment, it's really confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just looking at all the players that they lost, if you look just at the outgoings, you think that Valor got liquidated because of the players that they've lost.
Yeah.
It's just like you're like, there's the starting 11 and some,
Yeah.
basically. And so, yeah, losing for me, if you would have asked me at the end of the season last year, who are Valor's top 3 players, I would have gone Diego Gutierrez, Mateo de Brienne, Ryan Yesley, and all of them have left.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, who are you now? Who is Valor now? Like, what is
Yeah.
Valor now? Because you have still Phil Dos Santos, you gave him the reins, you extended his contract, and you've lost 3 big players. You also lost, I mean, Andrew Jean-Baptiste, who's been a huge player for them. You look at somebody we both really like, Walter Ponce.
Yeah.
You look at Andy Baquero, another, like, there was also, like, aside from the top 3, there's some players there that
Yeah. Nyongabire.
Nyongabire, like, either could have been really good for them or have been really good for them. And it's just like, it's such a turnover that I think the biggest difference for me is, like, with Halifax, you could understand that it was, it was a changing of an era with Stephen Hart leaving and bringing in, Patrice Geyser. You need a fresh slate. You need that, basically almost being a second expansion side. This feels, for me at least, when looking at Valor, this feels as like, okay, last year didn't work. Bin it all.
Yeah.
Bin it all. Let's just bring a fresh new batch and let's see what we can make. Yeah, I know it's such a tough task for Phil Dos Santos because, not saying, like, some of these players are really good. Some players have played in the CPL before, like, Sean Hundo, like Roberto Alarcon, like Tas Mortacutis, right? There are players that are CPL seasoned, so it's not going to take too much for them to adapt. You have some exciting young players. I mean, Temi Antonoglu, the player that they got from TFC Academy, who actually played for TFC for, I believe it was 12 appearances, and was a player that they were pretty keen on as a young player coming in. I think that's actually quite a good signing from Valor. On paper, I like their incomings. It's just the nature of everything that's been going on that kind of maybe dampens it a bit. You know what? Let's just reveal our gradings here and talk about why we gave the grades that we gave. I gave in retention a D. You gave in retention a C minus. I will say I'm pretty sure you gave that C minus before they lost Ryan Yesley.
Yep.
So I'm assuming now you've come back down to me in D.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll pretend that C minus is a D, because I figured that was the case. Yeah, I mean, for those who either saw the graphic or know the list of the outgoings, it's almost an entire, not even squad, almost an entire roster that has left. So it's the biggest players, solid players, utility players, depth players, all of them have been pushed out the door or have left themselves. So it's a tough one for Valor. I think I don't know what else you might be able to say, Mike, about their retention aside from it's looking a little shaky.
Yeah, and it's Phil Dos Santos saying, like, the last season, they've made no bones about it. They're the worst team in the league last year, so changes had to be made. But these were who Phil Dos Santos wanted, and it went really badly. And he's looked at all of these players, except a few who have obviously got quality that have been picked for a reason. But the players who they've let go that they couldn't keep, that's where the sense was saying, like, I wanted him, I couldn't make him a good player. Like, and it's all these players are players that he hasn't been able to make good players. Like, it's a quite, I mean, it's a harsh way to look at it, but when all of these players go, that's the manager who stayed is the one you've got to look at and saying, well, you had a decent defense at times. So some of these defenders maybe, yeah, they could continue to play quite well in a team that aren't going to try and push Cavalry or forward for a top spot, but they could get you off the bottom of the table maybe if you work with them this year. But it's just gone out. So this is a lot of work, and when things haven't been going well for the majority of your time in the league, it's hard to imagine that the same person is going to get a whole new set of players and change everything.
Yeah, it's one where I'm glad Phil Dos Santos is already bald, or he would be balding because of the stress of everything. Not only with
Yeah.
last season, but this. But like, I could not imagine myself, as a coach, having 16 players leave, bringing 10 players in, probably a few more. Let's be honest, Valour bringing players in for fun at this point, and then being like, yes, I'm going to make a playoff team.
Mhm.
That is ridiculously hard. It's such a tough task for him, and
Yeah.
we both rate him as a coach. We're not saying that he's not capable of doing some incredible things, but even for some of the best coaches in the league in North America, that is a tall order.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very much tough for him with the players that they have lost, but in the players that they've gained, we also have a little bit of a difference because I gave them a B. I really like the players that they've brought in. You gave them a C. I'm assuming because of looking at it a little bit of bigger picture, but like for me, Sean Hundal as your starting striker, I think that's a very solid addition. Tasman Kudus was a solid defender for York, bringing him in. Roberto Alarcon as well as a wing back is a player that can produce special things and is quite solid. Again, there's some players that I don't know all that much about, so I can't really talk about them too much. But I think for the CPL players that I do know, Animi Verhoeven came in now, who was like a relatively decent player for Ottawa. Maybe he could become a little bit better with Valour. They brought in that new goalie, the 32-year-old. What was his name again? It was Jonathan Viscosi. Came in from, I think it was Scandinavian League. I can't remember right now exactly. So they got an immediate replacement for Ryan Yesley. And more experience had, and he's played in Europe, so it's good to have a kind of keeper there. And then, like I mentioned, Antonoglu, it's a very exciting signing for me. So I think overall, a lot of the players coming in, I'm very keen on, and I'm very excited to see how they work for Valour. And I think individually they excite me, and that's why I gave them a B. But whether they will all work and gel together as a team, as a collective, that's where I think concern comes in. And is that also why you gave them a C?
Yeah. Just like I was already a C, and this makes me even more concerned. Viscosi, looking at it, like, I mean, it's very quick and not very like an intelligent way of looking at it. He has only played 4 full seasons since 2014-15. Like every other season, he's played 2, 4, 2, 1 game, 3 games, 1 game, 2 games. He's not a regular starter in any way. And at 32, he's been a backup most of his life. And you've now lost one of the most sort of promising goalkeepers in the league last year. So again, that's a big hit. And like I say, I agree with you. Sean Hundal was great. I really like, and I was excited for him to go there. But the changes that go around, there's just too much. There's too many questions around this team, and they're already not in the. They're going into quite a hostile environment. Some of these awesome players we look at, Tasmor Kudus, for example, I think he'll be good. I think he's been a really good player for York. But York let in a lot of goals. So like we can look at him individually and think, okay, it's a good player. Like it could go really well, but there is that flip side of he's coming from another team that leaked goals. Noah Verhoeven, like I just read that name and that's a name. Like it could be good. could be like completely
Very,
like,
yeah.
I may not even know he's on the pitch. Like if I quickly include like, so like that's I think that's the issue with some of these signings where it's just there's definite upside, but it also may not work. There's too many of those, and a lot of players that I don't really know enough about, which is why I can't say that it's going to work out.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's also why, despite giving them a B in additions, I gave them a C in potential, just because I think it'll be more incomings and outgoings to the point where it's there. I don't know what the identity of the whole club will be. It'll genuinely feel like an expansion side, but not in a good way, like it was for Halifax, where it's like a fresh slate, a nice start. It's more of a I feel like we're just throwing the kitchen sink to try to have something stick kind of vibe from it so far. So I give them a C, given that, yeah, it's going to take a lot to gel. And the fact that they're starting on the road for the first few months as well. So they're going to have, team bonding up in the air. It's going to be a tough one for Valour. So I gave them a C. And I think I can understand why you gave them a C as well.
Yeah, it's with these changes as well, like, and the fact they get a C is because they were bottom of the league last year. If this was happening to, say, Halifax did this again, like had the same like turnaround as they did last year, but mid-season with Patrice, like in the second year of Patrice Geyser, like if Halifax did this, Halifax would be a D, like D minus, because they in a position where they should be staying like consistent. You've done well. Valour haven't done well. They had to do something, which is why they still get a C. But I would have given a lower grade probably to a better team who had done the business Valour had done.
Very fair, very fair. It's hard to get any worse than last when that's where you were before. So we'll see if they improve in 2024 and whether we see more of that rotating door at Valour continue to spin with incomings and outgoings. We're going to now move on to the second last team in Vancouver FC. Starting with myself, I guess, looking at everything they've done. Lost quite a few players, mostly players that either didn't play all that much or were more bit part players. Obviously, Sean Hundal was a bit outgoing. Minjay Kwok could be surprising. Same with Amir Kanani. But you look at some of the players that they have brought in, and it looks like they've done a decent bit of business for themselves there overall. I mean, I don't know for you if it's something that you're feeling bullish about in terms of the chances that Vancouver FC has for the season ahead. But I think overall they're having quite a good off season.
Yeah, this is getting the band back together, isn't it? All the BC boys coming home. It's been great. I mean, Paris G, like you could imagine, we knew that was going to happen, and it took a little bit longer, but it did take away from the fact that that's a great signing. David Norman coming back in, really good. Vasco Fry coming back. He was really added some quality into the midfield that depth wise as well. It wasn't just like, oh, he's come in and he's lit everything up. It was the fact that he's complemented players well, able to rotate, move players around. It kept some big young players. James Cameron's still there, TJ Dahid's still there, Tyler Crawford, Cajun Chung's going to come back fit. It's exciting. And Grady McDonald, let's not forget the youngster. So yeah, a lot of excitement for him. I think you must be buzzing to go and see it for the first game.
Oh yeah, I'm not a BC native. I moved here recently, but if I was a BC native, I would be buzzing because I think this is a perfect marketing move for Vancouver FC, where it's like we are the new BC team, and we're gonna make it feel like we are our BC team by bringing back a lot of really good BC players, either from within the league or from outside the league, to make sure that you can feel connected and you can identify with the players on the pitch. Yeah. So from a marketing point of view, very, very good. I mean, going into the gradings, we've both given them very, very good grades. We both gave them the same grades in terms of retention, additions, and potential. Retention, we both gave them a B, and that's because I think maybe for the same reason, which is, I mean, Sean Hundal is one, but I think the biggest one for me was Min Jae Kwok leaving, because I thought he was a very, very solid player, versatile player, which Afshin loves, being able to play in the defense and the attack on the wing. Losing him to basically, I don't know where he's going. I don't think he has a new club, but losing him for free was a bit of a surprise. But aside from that, most of the players I think either were bit part players or didn't really show that much at all. Bar, Sean Hundal. So I think overall they did pretty well for themselves and not lose, like you said, a lot of the big young players.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, maybe B's a bit harsh even, like looking back at it, but it's definitely they've kept the players they need. Maybe they've been forced to keep a couple of players they would like to try and move on but are still under contract. But yeah, it's really impressive that, and especially after how well they ended the season.
Yeah, and then we both gave them A's for additions because, the quality that bring in Ben Fisk, who did, he was a good player for Cavalry last season, kind of lost his spot a little bit because of the exciting young players that came out of there, but he's still a very good player. David Norman Jr., he came off a very trophy-laden season in Europe last season. Grady McDonald is one of the top prospects overall in Canada. And I think that's for a BC team that is huge. I'm pretty sure, I don't think the Whitecaps were all too happy to lose an academy player of his potential. So to go to Vancouver FC, following in the footsteps of TJ Tahid and of James Cameron, I think is a great move for them to show we are the hub for young Canadian, or at least young BC players to come in and thrive and grow and evolve. I think overall, again, it's an A for me because they brought in the players that they needed to reach that next level, and I genuinely do think they'll reach that next level.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really exciting season for Vancouver, and hopefully it builds up the attendance throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly. Now moving on to the last team. I guess we forgot potential. We both give them A's. We both. I mean, I think it goes without saying. I think they're both. We both think that Vancouver FC are going to do much better than what they did last season, especially in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
Pretty sure we both have them pipped to probably finish in the playoffs. We'll do like a full table prediction another time, especially since we're running a bit late for time right now. But we both are thinking that they are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the league. That's what we both gave them potential. But now moving on to the final team, York United, another team that's gone through a decent amount of changes in terms of incomings and outgoings. Mike, for you, I know that last season York was a very hit or miss time for you, especially with disciplinary issues. What have you made of their transfer activity overall so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. The number of obviously the Mexican connection. I was completely wrong. I thought this may take a little while and they may try and sort themselves out domestically first and then approach some of these players from abroad. But they've gone straight into it and they're building the vision of the club they want to be, that they want to make. Excited bringing back Frank Sterling and Juan Cordova, bringing players like that back into Canada. It looks like a team. It looks like an ownership with a plan. I'll be interested to see how Martin Nash manages this, because he didn't have control over his players for a number of the games last season, but with a more structured back office, with a back office, like with owners, and a vision for this club all set up, like he's in a much better position himself to actually lead this team. You're not fighting week in, week out, waiting for answers as to is this club like what is the future for this club? They know now. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's still a few bits to do, but it's looking pretty decent.
Yeah, no, it genuinely is. I think some of the players that they have lost were some pretty big players. I feel like York United are also going through this change. It's going into a new era, and some of the players that they have lost are going to be leaving behind some pretty big gaps overall. So I think with all things considered, jumping into the gradings, we both gave some pretty low grades for retention. I gave a C minus. You gave a D in terms of retention. I would have given it a D, but there's one player that is making it a tentative C minus right now, and that's Nico Giansopoulos. There were rumors earlier that he hasn't signed a new contract with York, and he was training with Cavalry.
Yeah.
Cavalry now have a new young goalkeeper backup for Carducci. So is that still happening? We don't know. So I don't. Maybe he'll stay. Maybe he'll go. If he goes, I'd probably give a D. But I'm assuming he's staying, so that's why I gave a C minus. But for you, D, is that because they've lost Paris G, Lapare, Roger Thompson, and the like?
Yeah, and that's it. The Paris G was so important. Before Tasmordaku is probably their best centre back. They seem to want to play everything through Lapare, and they wanted him to be a key part of the team. So it was big key parts that are gone. So yeah, that's why I was the players who have disappeared were the ones with the cool heads as well.
Very true. Very true. That's an observation I didn't think about as well. Maybe even more feisty York United is on the horizon for us to bear witness to. But we both really liked their additions. We both gave them Bs in terms of addition. I think for me, Juan Cordoba coming back into the league after playing for a really good league in Chile, coming to the league as a Canadian international is going to be huge for York. I think he can bring a lot of experience, and I think he's a very, very solid defender for the league to be able to have. I think that'll probably be their signing of the season, unless they bring in somebody crazy next. But that for me is signing of the season for York United. Frank Stirring is a solid choice at defense. Don't know much about Salanovic. And then, the three Mexicans don't really know much about at all. I know Osvaldo Leon had been jumping between clubs in the first and the second division in Mexico. But, with a new identity that they have, bringing a couple Mexicans in, and, regardless of where the players might have been in the last few years that they've played in Mexico, that standard is quite high. And to be able to bring that to York United might be able to sort of raise them above their station a little bit, especially with the two young players, since we know that under 21 minutes were a little bit of a sweat fest for York United. So having those two players come in, I'm sure will be huge for them. I think additions overall, B is a fair shot for both of us.
Yeah, I think like I was saying before, it's the fact that they look like they got a plan is what swayed me going up higher maybe than maybe others might have.
Yeah, and I think that's why we both went for a potential B, because it seems that even though they've lost quite a few players, they have a plan. It looks like they're starting to build an identity, and I'm really excited to see what happens with this new era under still the same manager of Martin Nash, of how he sort of changes his own way of doing things to accommodate the new Mexican flair that York United have, and hopefully it'll bring them even more success than the one they had last year. But I think that's it for us. That is all of the teams. So thank you so much once again for listening to the episode. Hopefully you enjoyed all of the visuals that we put in. Hopefully you didn't mind the little bit of an hour and a half lecture for you there, going over all the grades for the teams. But if you enjoyed it, make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials so you can give us your thoughts on this week and every week's episodes. If you have any more ideas, if you have any thoughts, comments, or concerns, let us know. And if it's a really good idea or comment, we might shout you out in the next show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.